And welcome to Awakening Through Love, the podcast. My name's Rod Gordon,
And my name's Martina Hughes.
and today we're talking about something. You go.
Yes, today we're talking about polarity, but polarity specifically in relation to reigniting sexual intimacy in a long-term relationship. For those of you following along regularly, you'll remember 2 weeks ago we spoke about reconnecting with your lover after a period of no sexual intimacy, which could have been as a result of raising children, perimenopause, illness, conflict. In that episode, we looked a lot at dealing with the resentments and how to return to loving connection. The other element of that is how to embody polarities in such a way that two people feel sexual desire and sexual attraction to each other. So let's ask you a question, Rod. In terms of this element of polarity, before we dive right into the full exploration of it, can you share what polarity means?
Yeah. Polarity is literally in terms of what we're talking about, it's the sexual spark that exists between two people. It's no different in lots of ways to battery terminals on a car, like the positive and the negative. And it's not negative in a negative sense, but in terms of an electrical current, it's a receptive energy. So it's a directive energy and a receptive energy. So positive, negative, directive is positive, receptive, negative.
So the two opposites create
The
the
two
spark.
opposites, yeah. And so when we have two opposites, it is what creates the spark of attraction. And so before we even dive into that, we should probably talk about how do we get to a place of that neutrality where sexual polarities like disappeared.
Yes.
And why that happens in modern relationships. And it has to do with what we call resonance. And resonance is in lots of ways what our culture encourages.
Yes.
And values. It's like, oh, if we're the same, if we think the same, we feel the same, we speak the same, we use the same tone, we use the same words, that somehow we're close. It's like we're connected. Oh, we're meant to be together because we're so the same. And it's that will drive people crazy. I get it, but it ends up driving you crazy. So the other way resonance happens is when, two people get together. Quite often there can be strong sexual attraction at the start. And really, like in our work, that's the beginning. So that initial, what they call the honeymoon phase, is really the launch pad. That's where the relationship and the sexual intimacy begins, and it can build from there and become more. This belief in our culture that it disappears is many people's experience, and it's pretty much a byproduct of how we live and how our culture lives and the perception of relationships and intimacy. It has nothing to do with reality itself, but it is our reality because that's what's happening. And so resonance happens. It's from rubbing up against each other time and time again, day in, day out, constantly just rubbing up against each other. And so, like, if you've watched couples grow together, quite often, like, one of the things I notice is, like, a friend and someone will get together and then, they change, which is great. That's not a bad thing. I love that. But as they start to change, they start to assimilate. And they start to come together in their desire for closeness. They start to take on each other's mannerisms and the way they sound, the way they speak, the way they do things. And there's a beautiful unity in that, but there's also a trap in that. And the trap that exists in that is resonance, is that when we rub up against something long enough, we lose the spark. It becomes neutral. Everything gets dulled down. There's less conflict, but there's less anything else happening as well. And you don't have to have a lot of conflict to have, great intimacy and sex. Like, what we need in the opposites is the opposite qualities.
Mm-mm.
And so mostly what happens is our sexual desire and the understanding of what creates sexual desire and sexual spark is not really conscious in our culture. So then, if it's not conscious, it's unconscious,
Mm-hmm.
which means we're hoping that this person's the right person. We're hoping that sex will be alive in this relationship. We're hoping it comes back if it's lost. Maybe we're hoping it dies down if there's too much. I don't get that complaint very often. But these things, like when they're unconscious, we're waiting or hoping or wishing that things will be different in somehow. I mean, in that state, we're completely powerless, but we're not aware. We're not aware of what we can actually do to
Mm.
create what it is that we want. We're just hoping that it happens to us.
Mm.
And that's a terrible way to go through life.
Mm.
And so if we start to break down, like, what is it that creates, sexual attraction, we
Mm-hmm.
start to find that it is these opposites.
Mm-hmm.
It's these points of tension. So if we have, a positive on one hand and a negative on the other, the the gap in between is
Mm-hmm.
where that charge is. And so the
Yes.
greater the opposite, the greater the tension
Mm.
between those two.
Mm-hmm.
And that tension between those two opposites is the sexual spark. It's the sexual
Yes.
desire. It's the building of that tension and energy that allows our bodies to become aroused, to become
Mm.
excited, for desire to come online.
Yeah.
And so the resonance that happens from our day-to-day life of
Mm-hmm.
just doing life,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
waking up, making breakfast, looking after kids, go to work, just grinding,
Yeah.
all that rubbing up against each other in the mundaneness of
Mm-hmm.
life neutralizes intimacy,
Mm.
neutralizes intimate relationship. And in those situations, both people start to feel unmet,
Mm-hmm.
unseen, not valued, just this sense of going through the motions.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of what I hear from couples over the years is this sense of feeling like brother and sister or feeling
Mm.
like housemates. So there can be great value in what you describe as the resonance in terms of being teammates, raising children, running a house together. Like there's a lot
Yeah.
of value to it.
Yes.
And the
And
sexual spark is missing.
it'll die.
Mm. Excuse me.
Yeah, it's the
Mm.
smoothie we had.
Yeah. Coldness on the throat. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like, it's not that there's no value in
Mm.
resonance. There is great value in it,
Mm.
because there is that sense of feeling closer to our partner, of being aligned in where we're going and what we stand for.
Mm-hmm.
And they are beautiful things. And with those beautiful things, there comes their reciprocal.
Yes.
And so we don't need to fix that or change it.
Mm.
It's fine as it is, but we need to understand it.
Yes.
So whenever we're in a moment of resonance together, say you and I,
Mm-hmm.
sexual spark will be absent.
Yes.
And so anytime, like, if we're on a mission together,
Mm-hmm.
creating work stuff,
Yeah.
courses, programs, retreats, whatever, we're in a mission mode,
Working on the garden.
working on the garden, just, yeah, all those just day-to-day things that we do together,
Yeah.
they will create that
Mm.
resonance.
Mm-hmm.
And so the beauty of it is that feeling, but it's also, it's a poison for polarity.
Mm.
So if we're aware, we can consciously choose to shift gears.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, okay, so we're in a moment of resonance. One of us no longer wants to be there.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than demanding something from the other, like, if I want more sexual charge or polarity between us, then I'll start to shift. Or if I feel that you want more, then I'll start to change how I'm being in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say change how I'm being, it's not inauthentic, but it's like, how do I allow these other qualities and capacities that I have to come to the front of my body?
Mm-hmm.
And when I say that, when I say come to the front of my body, I mean so that another person can feel them. They're not latent and dormant and just sting sort of in my body or at the back of my body. It's like bringing it to the front.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if someone's really reactive and angry, anger's at the front of their body.
Yes.
Love might have taken a back seat. It's that kind of thing. So
Uh-huh.
these things move around and shift and change. And we can actually have some kind of autonomy or say over
Mm.
that. We can allow different qualities to come to the front. So if I wanted to create more polarity with you, then what I would do is I would start to embody more alpha or
Mhm.
masculine
Mhm.
qualities. And we use alpha and masculine interchangeably, but by masculine I don't mean like male behavior. That's not, majority of that's not masculine.
Mm.
But
Mhm.
if we're talking about masculine and feminine in terms of the qualities, or alpha and omega we use with the feminine interchangeably, we're talking about really specific qualities that have nothing to do with humans so much.
Mm.
So alpha qualities would be presence, stillness, depth, courage, integrity, trustability,
Clarity,
clarity,
con-
leadership,
consciousness.
consciousness, commitment, dedication. Any others off the top of your head?
That feels like a good starting point.
Yeah, like this is not a comprehensive list.
Mm.
This is just, well, this conversation. But
Yeah.
so what I would want to do in that moment then is embody those qualities. Now, what
Mm.
do I mean by embody? What does it
Mm.
mean? If I'm embodying a specific quality, it's felt and noticed by the people around me
Mhm.
without me needing to say anything.
Mhm.
And this is a really important piece that's quite often missing from our culture, from modern psychology and counseling. Like we create this awareness and understanding of what's happening for us emotionally, but we
Mhm.
don't create an embodied practice to create a shift within the body.
Mhm.
And so how do I embody these qualities of consciousness, clarity, depth, integrity, commitment, dedication? I have to learn to allow those to come through my body, through my eyes, and through my breath. So it's, and this happens like regularly throughout the day where we don't always know exactly what it is, but we can meet a person, or I can meet a person and they'll be like, this guy's a deep man, or he's really intentional about what he's doing. There's certain qualities about who I am that people will notice,
Mhm.
and something will stand out. And in that moment, I'm embodying something specific. It could be a moment where I'm embodying unconsciousness. That would
That
be
would,
disappointing.
in which case they're probably not having a "this is a deep man" moment.
No, they would not. And so these things that we notice are aspects of of humans and
Mm.
their behavior, and they mean a lot, and they also mean nothing at all because they
Mm.
can be changed so quickly. And so if I want to create a moment of polarity, I need to start to embody like consciousness,
Mm.
clarity. So how do I do that? The first thing I need to do is slow down. There's nothing about fast or busy that feels like alpha or masculine.
Mm.
Alpha or masculine feels like an empty space
Mm.
of almost nothingness. But in that space, anything could arise. In that empty space is actually full of infinite possibility and potential. So, how do I allow that to emerge within me? Well, then I would slow my breathing down and I'd breathe a little deeper,
Mm.
like breathe down into the base of my body. Like I'll do it now as I'm talking. And so, the longer, the slower, the deeper I breathe, the more trustable I'm experienced,
Mm.
the more conscious I'm experienced.
And
Also,
I just want to jump in a second because I can already feel that shift in you, creating a little buzz through my pelvis and lower body.
yeah, okay,
Yeah.
cool. Well, so in doing that, I'm slowing down my body. I'm slowing down my nervous system. So I'm starting to open towards what's happening in the moment. I'm becoming more sensitive
Mm.
because I'm noticing more. So
Mm.
I'm feeling more. I'm becoming more aware,
Mm-hmm.
becoming more conscious. So as I start to do that, I also notice how your body's feeling.
Mm.
How deep is your breath? How deep are you breathing? What's happening in your body? And I can start to feel what's happening in my body, can start to feel what's happening in your body. Because as I slow my body down and slow my nervous system down, it creates spaciousness.
Mm.
And within that space, I can notice things that I can't notice if I'm racing. My body's moving faster, if my breath is shallow and moving quickly, if my nervous system's activated. It's very hard to feel under those circumstances, and also to be present enough to notice the nuance of the feelings.
Mm.
So if I want to embody more alpha or masculine, then I have to be able to out masculine you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what that looks like is slowing down, doing less, deepening my breath. My mind has to slow down.
Mm.
Thoughts need to relax. The attention or awareness of my being can't be on my thoughts.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So, one of the qualities of, masculine presence or alpha presence is this sense of availability.
Mm.
And when I'm present, what it feels like is listening. Feels like listening with my body, listening with my emotions, listening with my mind, obviously my ears, but also listening with my awareness. So the whole entirety of my humanity is online listening and available
Mm.
for whatever's going to come next. I'm not adding any content,
Mm.
not adding any thoughts, not adding any feelings, not adding any ideas or actions, just listening
Mm-hmm.
and available.
Mm.
And in that slowing down, it opens up the moment so that I can notice more. But it opens up the moment and it evokes something very, very specific.
Yeah, so my experience in that when Rod is embodying that kind of alpha or masculine energy is that my body softens. There's a sense of being able to let go of any holding on, letting go of direction or knowing what needs to happen, and just to be alive to the feelings, the sensations, the aliveness, the constantly changing and shifting dynamic of feminine or omega energy. It's like it suddenly has space. I can be love, I can be openness, and melt into that space that's created by Rod.
Hmm. And if I slow down my breath, deepen my presence, become more conscious, more aware, it also does something really specific that an omega hearted or feminine hearted being requires, especially sexually. This is probably the most important thing I think that a man can bring to a woman sexually, and it's trustability.
Mm.
Because as I slow down and I become more present and I'm more available, what emerges in my experience in a woman's body is a sense of safety,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
that it's safe to feel. It's safe for me to bring my feelings. It's
Mm-hmm.
safe for me to have my feelings seen. It's safe for me to actually start to open.
Yeah.
And when a woman's heart starts to open, well,
Yeah, well, it's the softening and the melting that I was describing is a function of trust, because without trust, I wouldn't be able to soften. But also, then when my heart opens, I get to feel love and joy and delight and sadness and longing and all the feelings that I may hold in check when I'm doing all the functions of life. Suddenly there's space for all those feelings. My heart's open, my love can flow. There's a sense of wanting to allow all of this of who I am, all my feelings to have space, but then also to shower Rod with my love, this sense of like, oh, he's holding space for me to be all of this, to open in this way. I can trust him with my feelings. I can trust him with my body, my heart, my being. Oh, I want to shower him with love.
mm. And given that we're talking about sexual polarity, there's something really specific that you left out, that when a woman's heart opens,
Ah,
what else opens?
the vagina opens. Yes, that is true. Yeah.
Yeah. And so this is a really key point for any
Mm.
men out there. It's like, when people come to our work, one of the, especially men, one of the first thing I'll do is get them to meditate, slow everything down, and to start being really trustable with their word, to be impeccable. Do everything you say you're going to do. If you don't do it, own it. No excuses. Because without safety, without trust, her heart can't open. If her heart can't open, her pussy can't open.
Mm.
And not to the extent that it can. It's in some ways what I just said is not true. Like, yes, it can open and she can be receptive and excited and alive sexually, but to really go deep in intimacy with the lover, then what we want to do is we want to make love not just physically. We want to make love emotionally. We want to make love mentally and spiritually all at the same time. We want to take our love making to just beyond the physical. There's always an intuition that relationship and intimacy and sex is more available. There's this sense, there's more, there's more. What is it? People are so curious, always looking for different sexual styles,
Mm.
positions, things to toys to stimulate and excite them. The more doesn't come from the doing. The more comes from the awareness of the different layers of our humanity and learning to make love on all of those at the same time. And so, the most important thing for men is to learn to be impeccable with your word, to become incredibly trustable. If you say you're going to be somewhere there at 6:30, you don't rock up at 6:29. You don't rock up at 6:31. 6:30. That's it. That's when you said. And so that safety and trust, as her heart starts to melt open, everything else starts to open with her.
Mm.
And as she opens and that Amiga heart starts to be seen and felt, it it's it's like a flourishing garden. It just wants to burst open all the time, which means sexually an open woman, her sexual desire will out sexual desire any man's sexual desire.
Mm.
An open woman is like a magnet for love. And so in that loving magnetism, all that love and gratitude and appreciation that's emerging in her heart because of this man's presence and trustability, she wants to then, it can't just stay in her body. It has to go somewhere. The nature of the feminine is they generally want to feel things. So she wants to fill that space with love, juiciness. And so the way that she does that is she showers her chosen man with her love, sexually, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And so in that openness and that showering is this constant state of love flow. And so for people that are challenged with polarity and sexual intimacy in their relationship, this for the men is the key piece that you want to start working with. There's no tools or strategies or techniques you need to learn to warm her up. What you need to know is how to love her, how to be how to be with her in a way that she just wants to shower you with love without you doing anything. Like, take a moment to feel that. How many men would want to be showered with love physically, sexually, emotionally for doing nothing?
Mm.
Wow, damn, I do.
and and if I can just speak to that as a woman, that when the heart's open, when there's that place of feeling safe and loved and held, it also then it touches on my longing. It's that longing to be filled, the longing for sexual closeness, that sense of wanting to receive you into my body. It's like that longing, like really lights up my being when my heart's open and trusting and feels safe.
Mm, mm. Yeah, beautiful.
And longing is such a central part of the feminine embodiment, or the omega embodiment, and it can be tricky for women to navigate that, because in a world where women have been taught and kind of conditioned to be more strong and upright and independent and taking care of themselves, the feminine embodiment has been largely missing. And so coming into our bodies, learning to soften our bodies, to breathe, to feel, to allow energies to move through. It's been a challenging path for me, and it's something that requires consistency of practice for like softening and melting and opening into, but also being willing to be vulnerable, that in that feminine embodiment there is a real vulnerability that I see is often quite challenging for women to lean into.
Mm. Yeah, and vulnerability is an interesting one. Like, it's such an uncomfortable feeling to
Mm,
experience in the body. And if we're not willing to feel it, we'll never we'll never receive its beauty, its
mm,
rewards. It can't take us on a journey if we're not willing to go on it.
mm,
So when we avoid feelings like vulnerability, we're avoiding our own openness.
yes.
We're avoiding our own love. We're avoiding deepening the
Mm,
intimacy between two people. There's
mm,
there's there's no requirement for there only to be positive feelings in a relationship.
yeah.
And what we call these negative feelings of vulnerability, fear, dread, anxiety, whatever they are, there's actual beauty and richness in those if we sit with them long enough and deep enough that we start to fall down into them and we fall through the different layers.
Mm,
It's like, neediness is quite a common one in relationship,
mm-hmm,
which is a great polarity killer.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Nothing will make a human want to escape quicker than someone being needy, whether it's a man or a woman. But underneath that neediness is longing and yearning.
mm,
And how I describe it is that, longing is the ache or the desire for closeness or for a lover or for intimacy, whatever the desire is. And yearning is the ache that comes with that. And there's a real ache, but if we can sink into that feeling deep enough, there's so much beauty in the ache of that longing and yearning and the ache of the desire.
mm,
There's so much richness and beauty, but we have to have that equanimity with our desire
mm,
to actually fall down
mm-hmm.
into those deeper experiences of these surface experiences.
Mm. And one thing I just love to say about vulnerability is that because vulnerability is so often associated with weakness, but really vulnerability is it's the openness to allow what's here to be felt and just shown in that moment. Just allowing whatever it is to be felt and shown through the body, through the face, through sounds, through voice, rather than clamping down and holding on. It's allowing it to radiate through our body and being such that another person can feel us in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one of the beauties of, like, I love it when you fall into that place of vulnerability because it's so raw, it's so real, it's so delicate, it's
Mm,
so beautiful. And
mm,
so it's like for me to hold space for that in the relationship feels like an honor and a privilege. That sense of purpose of like, oh, this woman needs me. She wants me here.
mm,
I'm adding value to her life. It's such an important experience for me as a man in a
mm,
relationship to be valuable.
mm,
So having that honor of being allowed to see that, for me, it evokes the part of me that wants to be trustable.
mm,
Because in that moment, if you're willing to show me that vulnerability, there's such incredibly deep trust present.
mm,
And I know for me that feeling trusted, it evokes feelings of love in my body. As an
mm,
alpha or a masculine being, I experience love through being trusted.
mhm,
Being trusted feels better than being loved.
mm. Yeah, yeah, beautiful. And I know so many men have that desire to feel trusted,
Yeah.
and how much it changes a man's experience of love and relationship when he feels trusted. And
Yeah.
it's a really big journey for women to come back to trusting rather than withholding trust.
Hmm.
But before we go there, I know you described some of the alpha or masculine qualities. It'd be good to share some of the omega or feminine qualities. So, do you want to jump in on that, or do you want me to take that?
You go for it.
Okay, so omega qualities include energy, sound, light, movement, feelings. It includes this sense of allowing what's here in the body to be shown. It's our sensitivity, it's intuition, it's the capacity to nourish, to nurture. Feel like I'm missing a million things. Anything to add?
Can't have this conversation and get all the things.
That's true.
Yeah. No, nothing that stands out.
Mm.
But that feminine nourishment, intuition, love, aliveness, beauty, radiance, magnetism, they are all really beautiful,
Mm.
omega qualities. And I'm sure there's a lot of people listening going, yeah, but I have those and I have those and I'm a man and yeah, I'm a woman and I have presence and trustability.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just want to point out that these things exist in both humans, whether you're a man, a woman, or another, doesn't really matter what label you want to put on yourself. But at the end of the day, these qualities exist in all humans.
Mm.
And what we lead with will determine how people respond to us. So whatever I want to put out, people are going to respond to that in a really specific way. So if I come to you with, like, to Martina with my feelings and my aliveness and radiance and magnetism and love, and I'm all, wee, hi, I love you, and I want to talk about my feelings and stuff like that. That if Martina decides to respond and meet me there in that feminine way, which is will be likely for a short period of time, we have this really beautiful connection. It's like Netflix and chill, like eating, watching your favorite movies and eating whatever your favorite foods are. Oh, I'm just thinking about that. I'm on a diet.
There's Rod's amiga moment.
Yeah. Oh.
Fantasizing about food.
Oh, exactly. So totally forgot where I was going. In that moment, we'll create resonance. We'll create connection and it'll be quite beautiful. And at some point, she'll get sick of that. It'll start to create like an irritation, a rub. It's like if you're itchy and you rub yourself, it's good for a moment, but then soon it starts to hurt and then it really starts to dig and grate. And so it's the same here with this experience. So if I'm in that place, what happens is relational physics. It's an energetic experience. So in any moment between the two humans, doesn't matter what gender or any of that sort of stuff they are, but there's always going to be 100% omega, 100% alpha between the two of us. So if I hold in my body, say 90% omega, I'm showing up to the moment with my feminine, that only leaves 10% left of omega space to take up in this relationship, which energetically pushes her into that alpha or masculine disposition. She will naturally start to go to it, and I'll polarize her around to it. It's like magnets. And so I will push her around, and then she will hold eventually 90% of the alpha or masculine available in the moment between us. And I'll only hold 10. Now, sometimes that reversal, the polarity, can still be polarity, still sexually charged, can be really good. If it's unconscious and it's a habit, then what's going to happen is that she's going to be pushed into that alpha disposition 90% of the time. And she's going to she'll tolerate it at first. Tolerating leads to resentment. Then she'll start to resent it. She'll start to resent me, but she won't know why. She'll just feel it and it'll irritate her, which in her body mind is me irritating her. That's what she'll experience. And so then she'll start to take that out on me. And she'll have no idea why. She won't be able to help it. But I'm polarizing her into that position by my unconscious spewing of my omega capacity onto her. So what I need to be able to do is to be conscious of that. And if I notice her, and I'll notice because she'll become a little bit drier, a little bit sharper in how she communicates to me, or
And more attention on function than love.
yeah,
Yeah.
she'll become. And Martina has an amazing alpha because she used to be an accountant. She's super organized and businessy, but I'll notice it that she's getting businessy and really push do, and it's just like, okay, I'm showing up. I need to change how I'm showing up to this moment because I'm creating deep irritation in her body. So I'll start to deepen my breath, slow down, take my attention off my feelings. I'll still feel them. There's a difference between taking our attention and awareness off our feelings and not feeling them at all. They're not the same. So I'll take my attention off them. I'll allow myself to feel them, but now my attention's available for her experience. Now my attention and awareness is available for her experience. Pressure's taken off her. Because if I'm creating space by being present, if I'm being present to my own feelings, I'm filling the space with my words and my emotions and my feelings. Her experience is there's no space for her. So as soon as I start to become more present, withdraw my emotional dialogue or whatever it is from the moment, in that spaciousness, it allows her feelings to start to pop up in her body. They start to come online. So as that happens, first might come out the irritation that I just created. But then underneath that will be more of her love and who she is. And so now I've just consciously and intentionally made space for her and her feelings to be seen, to allow them to rise. And now she gets to feel the space and to have that omega energy running through her body. And I'm back to holding that masculine, but I'm adjusting based on what the moment needs. Like intimacy literally means close. So if I'm to create closeness with her, what allows her to feel close to me? That's what I need to pay attention to. And so in that moment, she naturally comes back in. And the omega heart is always looking for love connection. You know, the masculine heart is always looking for freedom. So, or purpose. Like there's a few different qualities, but the primary one is that the omega heart is love driven. The masculine heart is purpose driven. So, and purpose is heavily linked with freedom and trustability, but that's a side topic. But in that, coming back to that purpose driven part of me, I make space for the love driven part of her to come forward. Now, I have a very strong love driven part, and Martina has a very strong purpose driven part. But we use those aspects of who we are and what we've experienced in our life to consciously and intentionally create the intimacy and the love between us, rather than having some kind of wishful thinking that it'll just happen naturally, or if I meet the right person, it'll just happen. It's like, it won't. It's like saying, if I meet the right person, they'll give me $1 million. It's like, good luck with that. Or if you meet them, ring me, because I'd receive that. But so it's that conscious and an intentional allowing. I can take it from the intimacy and the relationship in that moment, from a moment of irritation, discomfort, hurt, even resonance, into a moment of polarity or deep intimacy and love, and even love making. And we can do that from any moment. Even from the point of view, we can turn arguments, like the middle of a heated argument, into deep love making. It all requires the skill and the awareness to apply these embodied principles.
And just to really kind of underline what Rod is saying is that it all comes down to choice and awareness. Like all men, all women have the capacity for alpha and omega qualities, and that the embodiment of either of those qualities affects how we show up in the moment, affects how our partner responds to us. So knowing that we have choice, then in a moment, like let's say if Rod and I have been working on something, let's say we're working on our new online course, Foundations of Intimacy. So we're in resonance mode. We're both embodying alpha qualities. We're getting things done. We're achieving. We're like, yes, winning at life because we're creating a kick-ass course. And then in a moment, I might go, oh, feeling a bit worn out by being in this productive, purpose-driven mode. So I'd be like, instead of waiting for Rod to change the moment, I could go, how do I change this moment? How do I bring love forward? And so then I would just deepen my breath and soften my body, allow my longing for love, allow my longing for that sexual spark to be there. And then I might just say to Rod, hey, babe, feeling so much softness and aliveness in my body right now.
Mm.
And so as I do that, and some of you may be watching, some of you may be listening, but if you're listening, it's like allowing my body to move so that he can see what's happening inside of me. He can see what I'm bringing to this moment. Or one of my favorite things to do is to even make it like a stronger kind of sexual charge, in which I might be like, hey, babe. And then I just go and like rub my body up against his, because that is entirely going to change the flavor of the moment.
Yeah. Do that.
And it's knowing that either person, man or woman, can change the flavor of the moment. It's simply a flavor. And it can feel vulnerable to be the one who changes the flavor of the moment. How I see it as a woman, it's like, instead of wishing for the love I want, I get to be a leader of love by like doing that thing where I brush my body up against his, or where I just like let my body undulate and move and sway in front of him, so that his eyes like they have nowhere else to be but on me.
Mm.
How does that feel for you if I do those things?
Good.
Can you say more about that?
No. Yeah, it feels enlivening. That's how it feels. Sometimes in the moment, if I'm deeply into what I'm doing, it'll feel irritating. And it's worth pointing out, because the alpha part of us that loves doing nothing, it doesn't want anything grabbing at our attention. And so when a woman comes and presses her body on you, there's a pull for the attention. And if I'm in mission mode, because I can only focus on one thing at a time, something else grabbing at my attention, doesn't matter what it is, will be some kind of irritant. But I'll also trust that you're pulling my attention for a reason. Maybe I'm gone too far with whatever I'm doing. I'm too immersed in something that doesn't matter. I've lost my way in that moment. So that opportunity is you waking me up.
Yes.
So that doesn't always feel good to be woken up from a slumber, even if I'm awake during it. And so there can be a real natural irritation that happens. And it's important to navigate that consciously and not assume that the irritation is you grabbing my attention. It's not you. It's my attention being pulled in two directions. That's the irritant. So it's not you causing it. It's just that's how it feels in my body.
Yeah. One of the things I would say that's important for a woman, if she brings that embodiment of pressing her body against a man, or swaying and dancing and undulating in front of him, one of the things I hold is my own sense of equanimity, where you're free to respond or free to not respond. So that equanimity within me of like, I'm okay whether you respond or if you don't respond, and that I can hold myself in that. That gives you much greater bandwidth for your response.
Absolutely. Without that, there's a feeling of being trapped.
Mm.
It's like,
Or
and manipulated, or that what I'm doing is wrong
Mm.
and not okay. So there can be
Mm.
lots of little side things, but the equanimity melts all that.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So if what I'm doing is really important, yeah,
Mm.
if I'm obsessing over my motorbike, I know that's probably not it. Yeah. So,
Mm.
and these gifts exist in both partners. There was
Yes.
something I was going to say, but it skipped my mind.
Mm.
I can't
Mm.
remember what it was.
Yeah. Can you give an example of how? I know you spoke about deepening your breath and slowing down. Can you
Mm,
give a practical example of how you might choose to change the moment between us?
mm. Yeah. Well, other than deepening my breath,
Yeah, yeah. Like, how might you engage with me to change the moment?
yeah. Well, I literally would start with the breath.
Yes.
Like I would deliberately slow my breathing down and deepen my breath right
Mm-hmm.
down into my belly. The next thing I would do is I would soften the front surface of my body. So just allow tension to melt. There can be like the gut has a tendency to grip, particularly with fear.
Mm.
So we want to relax any of that. Allow the gut to soften,
Mm.
to relax, to open. Because if fear is present, fear is like the opposite of openness. If fear is present, openness isn't. Openness and love is like fear has a gut clench to it, or clench in the body, or a tightening. So love has an openness in the body. So if fear is present, love is not. So I would soften all my belly, soften the front of my body, look at you in the eyes, and I'd start being curious. So I would start by just looking at you, seeing what you needed, noticing how you feel. I might ask a question, say, what's happening for you right now?
Mm.
You know, I might see that you're doing something and you need support, that you're a little flustered. So I might just immediately get up and start doing something
Mm.
so that there's a sense of weight and pressure is alleviated from you to give you the chance to open.
Mm.
But it really depends on the context of the moment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure, for sure. And I'll give you another context. If we were having a Netflix and chill moment where we're like, I shouldn't say this, but anyway, I'm going to go there. If we were eating ice cream and
Oh, we never eat ice cream.
we do,
I feel like
we,
5 years old right now
we haven't for ages. But if we were
because I get fat.
if we were eating ice cream and watching a movie and we're having like, a lovely, lovely amiga time,
Hmm.
what would you do to change the moment in that instance?
Turn the bloody television off. Kind of disruptive in a movie. Sometimes if we're watching something, I'll wait till the end of it,
Yeah.
especially if you're invested in it.
Mm-hmm.
But then I will start deepening my breath, relaxing my body, feeling spaciousness in my body. Like I'll lose interest in it at some point.
Mm.
So it's like I will I would probably do something functional. I might
Mm.
get up and get you a drink. I might get
Mm-hmm.
up and do something or start preparing something in the
Mm-hmm.
evening, like for going to bed or our routine to wind down. Um, but yeah, even then, it's going to
Mm.
revolve around. I'm going to deepen the breath,
Yes.
relax the body.
Mm-hmm.
It's not different at any
Yeah.
point. It's literally that simple
Mm.
because
Mm-hmm.
there's so much available in the breath.
Yes.
And it's like, I know it's really annoying to hear. I remember thinking at some point, if one more person tells me how to fucking breathe, I'm going to lose my shit. Like, clearly I'm doing it. I'm alive. But then, I had the thought, try living without it.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the breath is, well, it's the very thing that's giving us life, but it also
Mm.
gives us so much more if we allow it to.
Yes.
So I'd almost always start with the breath, because if I deepen my breath, like if I'm sitting there watching, a movie, at some point I'll start to get agitated.
Mm-hmm.
It could be like I'm just done with watching the movie. I could be just irritated because I'm in that Amiga state.
Mm-hmm.
I'll naturally want a bit of spaciousness rather than looking for that spaciousness from you,
Mm-hmm.
or to get away from the movie or to get away from you or whatever, to have physical space, to have it externally. What, for me, the practice is I need to cultivate that spaciousness, that freedom internally.
Mm-hmm.
So then what does that mean? That's where the breath comes in.
Yes.
Because as soon as I deepen my breath and I slow my breathing right down, what happens is, like, if one moment was an inhale and an exhale,
Mm-hmm.
and I make that inhale and exhale twice as long as
Mm-hmm.
what they were, and particularly, like, I will actually intentionally double the exhale. So double the length of the exhale to the inhale.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll do that, but in that moment, the moment gets drawn out till it's so long and so big. There's so
Mm-hmm.
much space in it. It actually feels uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'll start with that,
Mm-hmm.
creating that sense of freedom, spaciousness internally. Because
Mm-hmm.
that feeling of being trapped or cramped or pressured
Mm-hmm.
into something like, I have to sit here to the end of the movie, I'm going to lose my mind. Like, that feeling of being trapped most often in my body triggers the feeling of anger.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime I feel trapped, anger wants to rise.
Mm-hmm.
And the anger in lots of ways is a response to the the fear that sits under there, fear of being trapped, fear of not being safe. So then I'll sit with that, and then under that will be this vulnerability of just like, oh my God, I feel just,
Mm-hmm.
the vulnerability. So for me, that anger can rise from that trapped and vulnerable feeling,
Mm-hmm.
especially vulnerability. I know so much of my life I've covered up the feeling of vulnerability with aggression, anger. So once I've created that spaciousness inside, one, all that impulse of being trapped falls away. The desire to change the moment starts to fall away. But then I'll I'll slowly start to engage less, give shorter responses rather than long emotional responses, move into space holding more than anything. And this sense of just allowing the moment to unfold, allowing whatever experience we're having together to be present. But at the same time, like, in that, letting go of any need for it to be a particular way, but also creating that spaciousness inside of me. And then what that does is it shifts the energetic dynamic, because as soon as I become stiller and freer inside, more energy rises up through your body. And
Mm-hmm.
then I'll notice you'll start to move or fidget, or, energy starting to move. You'll
Mm-hmm.
start to feel or emote. So in that is that energetic shift starting to happen. So I'll notice that, and then I'll watch and see where it's going.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like a specific recipe other than the part about the breath, relaxing the body, slowing the moment down. When I'm doing that, I'm literally becoming more aware. So
Mm-hmm.
it's the embodiment of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So when I embody consciousness and I become more aware, then I can see what needs to happen next. I can notice what to do next. So it's not I don't have a prescriptive list of things that I do, but once I'm aware, then I'll start to pay attention to, like, what it is that needs to happen next.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful. And if we bring in the element of sexual desire, it might be one of my favorite things is for Rod to command me. So, and in that command, Rod embodies the alpha very strongly. So, if he was wanting to touch that part within me, it might be, I want you, he might say to me, I want you to go lie down on the bed. And I'll be like, oh, yes. And then if let's say I lay down on the bed and he began to touch me, that sense of like, oh, my body again melting open and responding, so that all of a sudden we're not just two people hanging out together, we're lovers again, because he's bringing that element of of masculine alpha embodiment that supports me to melt even more deeply.
Mm. Mm.
Is there anything else about the using the polarity for the activation of sexual desire in a long-term relationship?
Only what we spoke about the other day. There has to be a willingness to let go of the hurts of the past,
Mm-hmm.
like to forgive, to let go. Every time we think about those things that happened in the past, we bring them into the present moment because, like right now in this moment, we're sitting here on a podcast together.
Yeah.
Anything that's happened in the past isn't happening right now.
Mm.
But if I think about it or talk about it, then I bring it into this moment and it poisons the intimacy in the relationship now.
Mm.
So for love and intimacy, alpha and omega, for polarity, for it all to sort of flow, we need to be here in this moment. And if I'm thinking about something, you said in the past, or you did in the past, or a past lover did, or my parents did when I was a kid, I'm not here. I'm back there.
Mm-hmm.
And the the body mechanics, thoughts will evoke feelings.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm thinking about how I was hurt in the past, then I'm just going to have hurt feelings rising.
Mm-hmm.
Fear, anger, frustration, like whatever the feeling is. And now I'm with you feeling fear, frustration, and anger.
Mm-hmm.
So that's poisoning whatever's actually happening between us. Because one, you'll have no idea because I'm in a story in my head somewhere, and you're here in this moment going, wow, why is he so angry and frustrated? And then it'll start a downward spiral for you. What did I do? What did I say? Have I done anything? Oh, am I not good enough? And then boom, we poison the moments of intimacy and relationship by placing our attention in the past. Now, there's times to do that in a moment of healing or processing something, but as an habitual way of functioning, destroys intimacy and relationship. It has no place. It's abusive. And the way I like to describe it, it's like if I take every shitty thing that's happened to me and all the shitty things I've done and think about them and feel them and stir up the emotions in my body, I'm basically taking all my toxic waste from the past and dumping it in my lover's lap. And so it just, yeah.
That feels pretty shitty.
Yeah, it is pretty shitty.
It's like even though you're not actually doing it, even the description of doing it
feels gross.
shitty.
Yeah. And so every time I reference something you've done in the past or something that's happened in the past, I'm bringing that past moment right now into this moment. So I'm dragging my Qantas baggage car and bringing it into the relationship. Whereas those things belong in the past. They should be dealt with a therapist or a coach, a mentor, whatever modality that you work with, and I love most of them. That's the place for those. And it's okay to have those conversations in the intimacy of the relationship, but they need to be contained. They can't be habitual ways of being because then it becomes a habitual way of poisoning the intimacy. And the experience of that for me is, oh, this person doesn't love me. They don't want to help me heal. They don't want to listen to my shit. And when I say my shit, it's because if I'm feeling it now and it happened in the past, then I haven't processed it. I haven't finished doing my work. It has nothing to do with you. It's up to me. The feelings exist in my body. You can't see them. You can't know they're there. You can't feel them. Only I can, which means it's my work to do. So it's also a pointer or an indicator that by not processing or taking responsibility for the feelings inside my body, I am poisoning relationships. And I had a really sad insight at the start of our relationship, not at the start, but somewhere in it. I can't remember. But I realized that no relationship I'd ever had had ever had a chance. It could not have worked because I was constantly poisoning them. I was destroying them before they ever had a chance to get off the ground just by hanging on to stories and beliefs from the past. It's the moment my attention's in the past, I'm no longer present, which means I'm not connected to the aliveness of the moment and what's happening. I'm stuck in my head in a story. and they're like traps. There's times and places where they're valuable, and there's times where they're just poison.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Which really ties into that element of becoming more conscious and intentional in our relationships, because without consciousness and intentionality, it's impossible to create anything new or different.
Yeah. And I can't create something new if I'm just constantly, my attention is in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So it needs to be here now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And being here now is vulnerable. Creating something new or different is vulnerable. Making new choices will be vulnerable, whether you're a man or a woman.
Yeah. And in many ways, it comes back to what we spoke about at the start about trust,
Mm,
because to be present does mean to be vulnerable,
mm,
but to be present means to not know. Because when we're listening, so listening with the body, with the emotions, with the mind, the awareness, listening on all layers, we're totally open and available, which means we don't know anything
mm,
because we're only curious about what's arising or what's happening now.
mm-hmm.
And so when we don't know, we have to trust.
Yes.
And for those that don't do our work, just so you know, the trust literally means believing without knowing,
Mm,
believing without knowing. So then I have to choose to believe and I have to let go of knowing.
mm,
But whilst knowing is on the cards, trust is not present.
yes.
If I need to know what's going to happen next, know where we're going, know what we're doing, no.
Know how your partner will respond,
Yeah. And
which
then,
can even be a mental process. If I say this or do this, he'll do that.
yeah.
And that's not vulnerable, it's projecting. And yeah.
Yeah. And so we start creating these behaviors by avoiding the discomfort of the moment.
Mm,
And that's where our fear and our feelings start to drive our behavior, where
mm,
we become a very disconnected and unavailable human.
mm, mm-hmm,
And so that presence and available has no sense of knowing in it,
mm,
which is so incredibly terrifying that most people won't stay in that state.
yeah.
Whereas to be present, to be available means to be alive and aware in this moment, not projecting anything from the past, no desire for the future, just being here now
Mm,
is so excruciatingly uncomfortable. And I think that's why most people don't do it.
yeah.
It hurts too much. It's
Yeah.
too afraid and
Mm,
too much fear rather than know what's going to happen, know where we're going, know what we're doing, know what the meaning of life is, know what it's all about. It's like, well, good luck with that.
yeah. Yeah. And sexual desire is most rich when there is that openness of not knowing, of like, here's my body available to this moment. Here's my feelings available to this moment, without any agenda of how it's meant to look or what the outcome's going to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And even like for like as a man holding space for that, it's like no knowing like what's going to happen next. What woman am I going to meet today? Because it could be any feeling that's going to
Mm.
come forward. But there's something really beautiful in that too. Like so often,
If I can just clarify the what woman am I going to meet today, I just want to clarify that that's within your partner.
yeah,
Some people listening won't understand that.
uh, they will when I say the next bit.
Cool.
So quite often as a young man, and I still see it in young men, they won't commit
Mm.
to intimate relationships. No, I need to be with this woman and that woman, and I want to be with this one. I want to have this experience and this sexual experience and this kind of relationship. And they're all desires that are within men. And but for all the different flavors
Mm.
of a woman, all the different flavors of the feminine. And, unconsciously we think, oh yeah, I have to have all those experiences before I can just commit to one woman and be miserable. And that guarantees that that's what's going to happen for you. Yeah. But that impulse within a man to be with all the different flavors of woman, if that's applied skillfully and with love, it's like, how do I evoke all the flavors of a woman, all the flavors of a feminine being through my intimate partner? Because that matches the desire of a woman is to be all the flavors. So as to which woman I'm going to get on the day. If I have space for my woman to be open and to flux and flow and move through all her feelings, it's kind of like making love with someone new every day, because I never know who's going to show up. Am I going to have the sexy librarian? Am I going to have the feisty priestess? Am I going to have the soft, tender lover? Like, they're all available through her body if I have the skill to evoke those. And so it's a really beautiful experience to start to navigate that, because then I have to dive into all the places where I'm not strong enough to evoke those qualities. Like Martina mentioned, the desire for commanding. That's such an edge for me. It's like the opposite. Like, you don't tell women what to do. You don't, all the stories that I have in my head. And so, honoring her as a whole autonomous being, there's a part of me that doesn't want to tell her to do anything. It's like, no, be an authentic woman of however you want to be. But she's like, command me. And I'm like, oh, God, damn. It's like, oh, I just want to do nothing.
It's like my favorite thing.
Yeah. And so I have to lean into the discomfort. And whatever she asks for, you can guarantee it's going to be a weakness in me, because otherwise she wouldn't desire it. If it was present all the time, she wouldn't desire it. It becomes like resonance. So if I had this quality on tap of command, she wouldn't want that. She would want me to let go. But because it's such a weak part of me, an unexercised muscle, she wants it. And as soon as I get good at that, something else will emerge. And what that does, though, is that each time her demand for a different quality through me that she wants to evoke, especially sexually, calls me into leaning into parts of me as a man that are not developed enough, that are weak or need exercising. And so I look at these opportunities of her desire or what she wants from me, and then I look at who I am as a man and go, yeah, right. Okay, I'm so weak in that commanding area. So then I have to command. And it's uncomfortable. Like, it's not a pleasant experience, even though it ends up being a really pleasant experience. But leaning into it, even the idea of it right now, it's like, oh man, I don't want to do that. But I feel that part of me, her body already feels it. It's part of the reason that she desires it. She can feel that gap in me. And she's like, oh, I want that. So whenever there's going to be some aspect of my capacity as a man that's missing, her body will naturally want it. And it's part of how we awaken through intimate relationship. What I will desire from her will always be what she doesn't have. And what she desires from me is what I don't have on board. And so this is where intimate relationship calls us to become whole, calls us to fill the gaps within our being that aren't there. And we get a greater experience of our own humanity when we have all these extra qualities online. So intimate relationship calls us to awaken to the qualities and the capacities that are weak, underdeveloped, or missing in our beingness. And so her desire will always emerge from that which is missing within me. But then as soon as it becomes stronger, that desire in her body relaxes, feels satiated and met. It doesn't mean, okay, don't ever command me again because I'm good with that now. It means she'll want to feel commanded when she wants to feel commanded, because that capacity is there, but the grabbing need or strong desire relaxes. But then in its place, something new will emerge, and something new will always emerge, which means our journey to awakening through intimate relationship involves our sexuality and our experience, because there's no greater domain that our gaps in who we are show up. They show up in our sexual desires. The root of our sexual desires are all the things, all the qualities that we're not actually strong at. We can't evoke, which is why we crave them from the world around us, because they're missing from our life in every element. And so an example of what I mean there, like command, leadership, clarity, direction. So it points that I need to be stronger in leadership, clarity, and direction. If I start to look in all the areas of my life, they're all areas where I feel challenged or have been challenged and had to work on. So her desires, what she craves, what she wants from me, from the sexual spark, the polarity experience, calls me to awaken to the parts of me that are underdeveloped and allows me the opportunity to develop those in the safety of our intimate container so that I can go out into the world and be a better version of who I am as a man.
Mm. Beautiful. Beautiful. Hmm. Well,
And it's the same both ways.
yeah, I was going to say, I feel a little bit lost for words. I got lost in listening to you just then.
Did I suck the air out of the room?
Yeah, there's something so beautiful in sexual desire that gives us the opportunity for waking up. And one of the things that Rod just described around feeling that discomfort that he has about commanding, that is again vulnerability. So it's the willingness to be vulnerable, the willingness to lean into the things that stretch us. Because I think what I see in long-term relationships, like being functional often becomes so comfortable for people, but sexual desire is not where comfort exists. And so there's always going to be that stretch, and like, it's like Rod will always ask me for like more vulnerability, more surrender, and I'll be like, haven't I opened enough? Aren't I vulnerable enough? Haven't I? And it's like, oh, there's always more to go. Like his body is calling for something that it's like, if I was going to, I jump into my head's like, but I'm already vulnerable. I've been vulnerable. But it's like, if he's asking for it, then that's the medicine that's needed. That's the medicine that our relationship requires in that moment. It's me being vulnerable, that and bringing that emotionally and sexually, that speaks to his heart and allows a deeper sexual connection to happen.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, I feel like we've covered a lot of ground. The one last thing I will say about polarity is, just because it's such an area that can be loaded and charged and misconstrued, is none of this is prescription or dogmatic. It's all about using intentionality and consciousness to create what you desire.
Yeah, and depending on like how your relationship looks, whether you're man and woman, woman and woman, non-gender with non-gender, like none of that matters. These qualities will all exist in both people, and even like in a heterosexual monogamous relationship like ours, all those desires and that flowing between, alpha and omega, we're both doing that all the time. My own omega feminine capacity has great capacity to serve Martina. Like, she's so business focused. Like, she runs our business. I don't have anything to do with that. If you leave me to organize stuff, I will screw that up beyond belief. I'm amazing at it. But I'm artistic and creative. So in lots of ways I have like some really strong big omega capacities, and in those areas, Martina has a much stronger alpha or masculine capacity. So she'll run all that sort of stuff. I don't do that. So we flow between those qualities. There's no dogma, there's no rigidity. It doesn't matter. I can be totally feminine or omega, and she can be totally alpha, and it'll evoke polarity. Doesn't matter how you do it. It works in any configuration or any kind of relationship. But the beauty is in recognizing what's serving you in your intimacy and what's not. And then what adjustment can you make a difference? Because that's when you're empowered as a whole human and you're not a victim to life or your partner or the circumstances or the situation. You're empowered to create the change that you desire to help your intimacy and relationship thrive.
Beautiful. It feels like the perfect place to complete.
All right. She wants me to stop talking.
Thank you, everyone, for listening.